Simon, is that your father-in-law that you fired off the cannon without warning?
That would appear to be the case. You're recording now as well, aren't you, you bastard?
I was trying to get the ball rolling, and you sounded like you were getting ready to jump into a good story.
Man, yeah, I just told him. I heard his father-in-law talking to him, talking to his wife, and he said, "Yeah, I just stepped down off your porch."
Boom.
Sure, he had some choice words for you.
Wouldn't be the first time.
That's probably a reoccurrence.
We are up here once again on the mountain at Simon's joint. Normally we let Corey come in with the music. Today we're going to let Josh come in with the music as normal, since he gave us his valuable time last night. Come out to our event with Spike Cohen.
Did a great set.
So thank the Hardwell Grice Band for bringing us in here today. I'm your host, Billy Riddle. With me, as always, is my T-Tex supporting co-host, Sir Simon Winch. Simon.
I did have a bit of a run-in with the tax assessor this morning, and I did use some fairly foul language. And I really shouldn't be taking it out on the people knocking on doors. But he just surprised me. I was on my tracks. I had a hammer in my hand. There's all sorts of things that could have gone wrong. But anyway, he was given fairly short shrift and told to leave the property fairly quickly before I got off my tractor.
You should have been polite and just be like, well, sir, you being the tax man, why don't you come back up here for lunch this afternoon and we'll have you a burger. And then he steps into this libertarian, well-armed stronghold with a cannon pointing down the driveway.
I love how Simon just said the most American sentence in the most British way possible. Like, he's talking about chasing off revenue agents from his property. I gave him short shrift and fairly quickly.
Yes, he departed swiftly.
He departed swiftly. I love it.
So for this show, as you just heard, we're being joined by Spike Cohen, and it's a big event. We're also being joined here by Chip Slate of Being Libertarian. For all you libertarian people out here tuning in for the first time, you're going to know his page. We got Henry Law of the TV show Moonshiners, who's had a chance to hang out with us the past couple of days.
Been pretty cool.
Yeah. Andrew Kimball's down here on the end. Y'all remember him from one of our first shows. One of my first 10 shows was with him and Sarah DeRose, who was running as a libertarian candidate in Bedford. I was just like, I just want to get her name out there. And then here we are. And of course, we got our buddy Chris Montgomery right here.
Don't you say it. I will kick that chair out from underneath you.
Don't say chocolate drop.
Do it.
I didn't know that's what you were talking about.
Yeah, you knew exactly what I was talking about. That smirk on your face said it all.
Foggy Ridge Cattle Company provided the burgers here today, and I think everybody, I'm speaking for everybody when I say what a phenomenal burger.
The beef's just one half of it. The cook's the other half.
There you go.
Give it
to Buddy.
Yeah, give a shout out to Buddy.
Speaking of that, yeah, we had a Buddy of what will soon be the defunct Buddy's Barbecue, because apparently, you go check out his webpage, you're looking for a new name. I think Appalachian Podcast Barbecue sounds like the best name he could go for.
And on what basis? Go on, tell the listeners all about how he's had to change that name.
What is it, Buddy? Something like it's a copyright infringement, trademark infringement. There's another Buddy somewhere.
It's your name.
From Tennessee.
It's
from Tennessee, and they moved into Appalachia and trying to run the original Buddy of Appalachia out.
Yeah.
That's all right. Y'all don't go to it.
Mm-hmm. Could you go by like original Buddies or something like that? Or
they trademarked in 77.
But new Buddies. New and better Buddies. Better Buddies Barbecue.
Yeah,
there you
Build
go.
Back Better.
Build Back Better Buddies.
Oh dear, I just threw up. I just threw up.
This is Build Back Better territory here, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's Biden flags everywhere.
I was surprised on the way here.
You know, but yeah, Buddy, thank you so much for his time last night. We had a phenomenal event up there at the early end. He brought the food truck. Everybody was well fed. Everybody had nothing but good things to say.
Brian was running around like a headless chicken.
Rocky Mount Burger Company, yeah, thank him so much for having us down there last night and having the event. I thought it was a really good crowd. It was hay season, so I know about 30 or 40 farmers hit me up like, man, I just could not make it out. And then there was a lot of
it was midweek and hay season.
But I think quality over quantity sometimes. We had a really good crowd of people last night, some really good ideas, some really good things to say. So thank Brian and the Burger Company for that, for coming down there, providing everything for us for the week. I mean, everybody asked me how I really put this together, and I think this whole event is a prime example of what we kind of stand for around here. It's everybody chipping in, everybody giving you a little bit of their time because it's something, these guys believed in us, we believed in them, and it was that simple. Like, we didn't really have to do a lot, but just ask people to come.
You got to generate traction, and that actually requires a little bit of effort, funnily enough. And I'll come on to that a little bit later on.
So for everybody out there that's listening to us for the first time, I know there's a lot of libertarians out there that are really tuning in to hear Spike and Chip right here, because I know I'm going to shut up here soon and let them do a lot of talking. But if you want to support us, we have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/getontap. Just $3 a month to get all the shows early, in full. We're starting to amp up our subscriber-only content on there, and it's just a good way to help us. We're putting it right back into the community. Or one-time donation, Cash App, Get on Tap. Venmo, Get on Tap, and WB Riddle for PayPal. So any help, anything, we always putting it right back into the community. We're trying to build something here, something special. So for everybody that's made the day, Isaiah Rickman and Rickman Inc., he can do about anything that you need him to do. Layman's Electric and Plumbing, of course, the Burger Company and Buddies, Pruitt Brothers Construction, Melvin's Farm to Fork, Safe Side Tactical. We're going to have that guy on here a little bit later, hopefully, if we can make it work. But if not, they've been a big help. They sent a guy down here today, full out range. We're going to fire some toys, have a good time. I hit them up and I said, bring them down here and let's talk about you. And Safe Side, it's good for where it's at. It's in Roanoke, and I think some of the inner city people there should really take advantage of it and go and use that range and start protecting themselves. Stop waiting for the police to do it, because they're not doing it in downtown Roanoke. We all know the problems that's going on there. But anyway, so let's get to what we're here for today. Now, Spike, you've been here for a couple of days now here in Appalachia, and I guess everybody just kind of wanting to put you on the spot and see what you think so far. What kind of a time have you had?
So I'm gonna sum up how my day has been, or really my whole time here. I'm currently sitting here eating rainbow trout and asparagus. I just fired a cannon. Earlier, I was petting a goat, and there are chickens walking around. I'm pretty happy. I think this whole experience has been incredible. First of all, the weather couldn't have been better, but honestly, more important than any of that, the people.
Don't forget the moonshine now.
Well, see, I don't drink, so it smells great.
Don't worry, we do.
Moonshine was there, I was told. But the people have been absolutely incredible. Again, being able to get to meet y'all and hang out with you, and seeing frankly, the community that you're building is just inspiring. Something I wanted to say, and I want to make sure before I forget, I've talked to 4 or 5 people during this event where they've said, they're a big fan and they're very libertarian and everything. I'm like, oh, cool. And whenever I meet someone who says they're libertarian, I ask them how they became libertarian. And I'll say, oh, great, how'd you become a libertarian? They go, Billy's podcast. So you're doing a big thing here, and I could not be more happy to be a part of it.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time, and it's a slow process. We've had these discussions, and Chip right here, got to know him a little bit over the past few weeks, because when you all immediately said you were coming here, I hit him up. I said, man, I know he's over there in Patrick County in Floyd. He's got a massive reach, and the two of y'all were big reasons why I became a libertarian. I think Ron Paul kind of set the tone for me when I was a little bit younger, because I was coming back home from overseas, and he was making the most sense. Put somebody in combat and they'll come back the most anti-government person that because they see all the waste. They see, even they're completely shit on. They don't get the proper gear, and you're sitting there thinking, we're the most well-equipped army, military, the greatest that this world's ever seen. That's what we're told, and it's taken you 9 months to get us chest plates, and we're outside the wire every single day.
And whilst they dump how many millions worth of kit back in Afghanistan in a so-called interesting withdrawal?
Yeah.
Oh, billions.
Yeah.
Billions.
Yeah, it was billions.
And we couldn't get sappy plates. The first day we got sappy plates was 9 months in, and my buddy took a bullet straight to the heart that day. Talk about timing. But so when I come back, I was like, well, none of this makes sense. George Bush is completely full of shit. And Ron Paul started making sense. And then, kind of, after that whole campaign, I kind of fell back. And I started listening to Dave Smith a few years ago, and Dave Smith kind of pointed me in the direction of Spike, and then I typed in Libertarian, found Chip's page, and they kind of all come together to the point to where they make the idea cool. And I forgot, maybe I was telling Spike earlier, but I said, or it was Brian, I said, city Democrats will make libertarians look like right-wing nutjob, weapon-carrying kooks. Republicans in the country that don't like libertarians will make it seem like we're a bunch of heroin addicts who want the consent laws to be 12 years old. None of that is farther from the truth. But that's how they do a good job of dirtying the waters, muddying the water. So when I start seeing what Spike's doing, he's doing some cool stuff. What I see Chip over here doing with his page, I mean, they're reaching a younger audience, but that younger audience is able to start relating to older through something as simple as a meme or something as simple as giving the ATF hell and cyberbullying them as Spike does such a
cyberbully the government. Yep.
So that's kind of how I got here. So, to be sitting around these guys, I'm curious what led y'all down the path to libertarianism? What got y'all actually in the mix?
Well, for me, it was the same as you. It was just going to college and in the background hearing Ron Paul give speeches and being like, hey, wait a minute, that sounds exactly right. And that makes the most sense to me. And that got me started. I'd been a conservative growing up, and so it was, it's easy for me now to say and look back and be like, what on earth was going on? But Ron Paul was saying things so much earlier than everybody else. The late 80s, talking about the FBI as we see them today, and what they really are, things like that. So that's what got me into libertarianism originally.
Yeah, and so interestingly enough, very similar. Ron Paul was a big part of it, but not in the way that most people say. Most libertarians say, I heard Ron Paul talk, and it just made perfect sense. For me, first time I was hearing Ron Paul explain things, I was angry. I was outraged. I couldn't believe that he wanted the terrorists to win and America to lose. I was 19 years old when 9/11 happened. I didn't really have much of a political thinking before that. I pretty much just, in retrospect, I was a libertarian. I just wanted to be left alone. I didn't think the government should be involved. But when 9/11 happened, and I heard from both sides of the aisle, from Democrats and Republicans and all corporate media, that this happened because the terrorists hated us for our freedom, and we had to fight back against these evil people that wanted to take over the world, and the only way we could do it was by bombing and destabilizing and invading any country that got in the way, and you're either with us or against us. I bought into that 100%. And when annoying libertarians like Ron Paul and Matt Kibbe and other people like that would show up and say, none of this is true. They're lying to you. They've lied before. You don't know the history of the Middle East, U.S. involvement in the Middle East. You should read Al-Qaeda's reasoning for why they actually did this. They're bad guys as well, but they didn't just do it because they hate us. There's actual reasons behind this. This is blowback and all of that. I was outraged. I was incensed. I didn't believe any of it. And they made predictions. They said we weren't going to be greeted as liberators. We were going to waste trillions of dollars. We were going to lose thousands or even tens of thousands of lives. We were going to kill millions of people. It was going to run up trillions of dollars in debt. We'd lose more of our freedoms here to the spying and everything else. And I watched it happen, and that made me realize that libertarians were right, and that took me down a journey into figuring out what I believed, and that led me to libertarianism. But I was one of those people that would be angry when I'd hear Ron Paul say that stuff, but he stayed consistent even when people like me would be angry, and it was that consistency and him ultimately being proven right that made me rethink everything.
Simon, when did you become a turncoat redcoat?
Well, I mean, that's a tricky one, because I'm not going to say I would originally be perceived as very much a right-wing conservative kind of guy. And to a certain extent, I still lean that way as well. I despise progressivism. I will not live under the Marxist boot of communism or socialism. I fervently believe in the Constitution. To say I'm a libertarian, I'm not sure. I'm certainly a constitutionalist.
I think libertarianism can be a political ideology and be a philosophy. And I think more in the urban areas, it's more of a philosophy. In the rural areas, it's more of a philosophy around here, more of an ideology in urban areas. Because it's, around here we have different means of communicating. Like you could be very politically active in an urban area, but not really understand how all those things are put into practice as they are in a rural area. Like we really have barter systems, trading systems and stuff.
I was going to say that's more of everyday life for us. We barter and trade between each other, and we just want to be left alone and raise our kids how we see is right, and tell the government to go to hell on somewhere.
Well, that's the question, Simon. To what extent do you trust the government to intervene?
Absolutely zero.
That's
absolutely 100% zero.
That's called being a libertarian. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Spike, I have a question for you.
Sure.
If everybody, you have your hard lefts and your hard rights. If everybody in the center voted libertarian, would it flip a vote? Like everybody this year that sits in the center, could it change the actual White House as far as from Republican to Democrat?
I mean, it certainly could. If enough of any group of people votes, then it could change it. But one thing I want to say is that it's often perceived that libertarians are centrists or moderates or somewhere in between Republicans or Democrats. Some of that is our fault. For a very long time, a lot of libertarians, especially in the Libertarian Party, tried to sell us as the best part of Republicans and Democrats. You know, we were fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And the problem is, when you first of all, it's not true. And second of all, when you market yourself that way, you're basically saying, hey, you know those two parties that you really hate? We're kind of like both of them. Also, we don't really have much of a chance of winning. That's not a selling pitch. It hasn't worked. And the reality is it's not true. We are fiscally libertarian and we are socially libertarian. We want government out of our lives in every aspect, and we want them to leave us alone as much as possible. But yeah, I mean, if enough people who are sick and tired of the back and forth good cop, bad cop routine of Republicans and Democrats says, you know what, I'm not wasting my vote anymore. I'm going to vote for something I believe in. Yeah, the Libertarian Party absolutely could win.
We'll never see that day come.
We may not. It's very possible we may not.
The government's got too much control, man. They got too much control. They've had it for all these years. They're not going to give it up.
They may not. This is also, Henry, this is why I focus a lot on local politics. Right. Because long before we have a shot in hell of winning the White House, we're already winning hundreds of local races. We need to win thousands of them. We need to win tens of thousands of them.
So we lived it all our life being in the moonshine business. You know, we love this country, but the damn government's always been on us so bad.
Exactly.
I mean, they kick your doors in and just use this excuse, or some guy that sent them to our house and they didn't have to tell it who it was, and just they got so much stuff they can do to us citizens here in the country that, you know, we've hated them for a long damn time.
Yep.
But I never consider myself a libertarian, but you know, maybe.
I'm hearing a lot of anti-government sentiment. That's usually indicative of being a libertarian. But yeah, I think when we win more locally, then we show not only can we win, but we show that you win too when libertarians win. We also show our ideas work in practice, not just in theory. And also it's the races that we have a better shot of winning right now. We still need to run those bigger races for a variety of reasons, but we can't continue to put our focus on that when we're so small and have the chips stacked so much against us, because it just helps reinforce the narrative that we can never win if that's all we're ever focusing on.
We had something interesting happen. Let me see, maybe 10 days ago, a couple of weeks ago, where we thought that we had stabilized our school board into a 50-50 situation, which is, you know, palatable, I suppose, would be the most polite thing I could describe that as.
Hey, Simon, I got to go. We got hay in the field. I got to go.
I hear it.
Spike, it was awesome.
Absolutely.
Meeting you, hanging out with you. Henry, good to see you again.
Good seeing you again.
It's great to meet y'all guys. Billy, Simon.
Foggy Ridge Cattle Company. Y'all need a Facebook page. You got the group.
Yeah.
Find y'all out there. I mean, the meat's delicious. I think everybody thought so with the burgers today and the way Buddy prepared them. I think.
Thank y'all. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy watching y'all eat it. I'm out. I'm going to make hay. So
whilst the sun shines, go on, finish that statement.
Make hay while the sun shines.
There you go. Thank you, mate.
Yeah. Hey, y'all be good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Thank you for coming.
So we'll get back to my thought there, and trying to keep hold of that is always interesting at my age. So we thought we had a reasonable balance of left and right. It's still a messed up situation, but anyway, something came up where the superintendent, who doesn't have a voting position on the board, but as we're figuring out, administrators throughout all local government process have a significant impact on how they affect the local populace. Okay. So it may not be the elected officials that you put in place, but the administrators behind these board of supervisors, town councils, school boards. The administrators seem to be the guys that have far greater influence, more so than the elected officials. And this came to be, and I've got a problem with that because that's arse backwards, right? That's not how it should be. Yeah, the elected official runs a damn show, not the administrator telling how the elected official to cast their vote.
Yep.
That's horseshit.
Yep.
So, anyway, the school board lady resigned here, and I'm sure there's some underlying reasons behind that, and I get it, but I'm not going to discuss that. There's no point. So they were looking for a new school board superintendent. Now, bearing in mind the school board of 8 people, whoever puts 8 people forward for an elected position is asking for a stalemate to start with. So the whole process of having an 8-member voting board is absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, we thought that, they may have found someone appropriate for the administrator and school board supervisor. Well, we got this dude from another county, fairly local, who appears to be, from all local comments, a very progressive, cancel culture, woke, just the last person that we need administrating the school business and affecting our kids is this kind of character. Yet, somehow, he was voted unanimously by the whole damn school board.
Yep.
Now oh no, I'm going to start again. That really pisses me off, and the road I was going down. Now, and that to me is when you're affecting local politics, you've got to be very careful about the people that you put and elect into these positions, because you need to elect the people who've got a spine and going to stand up and question, because apparently this cat went through a number of interview processes. He looked really good on paper. Well, Hitler looked bloody great on paper in 1933, right? So I'm looking for people that have got a pair that can stand up and push back against this culture of absolute fucking lunacy. And that's where we're at. We've got to find these people, because getting someone who is woke and cancel culture and all that bullshit, and now he's found a place in our school board system, which is influencing our kids, is madness.
And do you know why it was unanimous? Because more than likely, a big part of why they picked him, and this is what was on paper, was his ability to get and retain the state and federal funding that they need. This is the biggest problem, and this is across at all levels of governance, but especially in education. School boards basically can't do much of anything. They are basically a rubber stamp for whatever the states and the Department of Education, the federal Department of Education, tell them to do, or they don't get the funding.
And that's a carrot and stick shit that really pisses me off.
It's all carrot and stick.
Yeah.
And they leave the semblance of local control, quote unquote, with the school board, so that people think it's the problem with the school board.
And it's not
very often not. It's the fact that the federal government is involved in education in the first place, and probably the fact that the states are involved in education. Education should be decided by parents working directly with their schools, or the parents just raising and teaching the kids themselves. But our school boards now are just rubber stamps. The elected, and that's why the elected officials put as much of it on the administrators as possible, because they can't do anything anyway.
Yeah, it's complete madness. Thankfully, Governor Youngkin has reversed some of the policies of Blackface Northam.
He was impersonating Michael Jackson.
Yeah. That came and bit him on the arse, and it did so deservedly, quite frankly. And I rejoice into that.
So maybe not.
I have a side story there, but I don't want to derail what you were talking about.
Thankfully, but that's down to the whim of the governor, who is elected every, is it 4 years or 6 years? 4 years, every 4 years. So, that whim can change as quickly as it blew through. So we could be back in the face of a Northam and worse in 3 years' time. And, this nonsense has got to stop.
Absolutely. I would be remiss not to give my thoughts on the blackface Northam thing, since we are in Virginia. I think it's hilarious that anyone in the progressive left, when they get caught in their own cancel culture, so I think it's beautiful. So certainly no tears shed there, but I did feel bad for him for one reason. He was a Michael Jackson impersonator who could do the dancing, and he said that very proudly. And one of the reporters asked him, well, can you do it for us? And his face lit up, and he started looking like towards the floor. He's looking for a place where he can start moonwalking, and his wife shuts him down and says, no, that wouldn't be appropriate. And so this guy already knows he's done. He's like, well, at least let me moonwalk.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, fine, it's not appropriate. And I knew that feeling because I know you can tell from looking at me, but I'm actually a fairly good salsa dancer. And when people will say, wow, can you dance? I look to a place where I can dance so I can show off because I'm proud of it. That was the same look he was giving. I believe that man, well into his 60s now, I believe that man can still do a very solid Michael Jackson impersonation. I want to see it.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be with the blackface. I want to see the moonwalk. I want to see all of that. And his own wife shot it down. And I think had he said, you know what, screw it, I'm doing the moonwalk, I don't care what my wife says, I think he could have gotten reelected.
So we know who was wearing the pants in that relationship too.
Well then,
sorry, did I drop another bomb?
Should we move this conversation towards how wrong our wives are so often, or just
Hey, you're on your own, Billy.
Yeah, no,
You're on your own, brother.
I like to stay married.
I was trying to fill the room. But you talk about all this kind of local stuff, and this is a big reason for a lot of the things Spike does. I want to talk about your nonprofit because it kind of coincides with exactly what we're trying to push around here. And I thought he would be a good fit around here. And when I bring somebody like Henry on as well, like Henry of everybody knows more about what the boot of the government is capable of in this town, as somebody who probably could be retired in a mansion right now with the money had the law not come in and constantly over and over again, destroyed his operation or tried to haul his family off to jail. And all because they weren't getting their cut.
That's it. But they started changing their laws on it. They tried to make us, the Moonshiners look like gangsters. They started using RICO acts against us.
Yep.
Started taking properties and stuff. Lock people up, take the properties before it was even tried. And a lot of times they sell their properties. And that's what blew my mind. How can you take a man's property? He's never been convicted of anything and sell it. It's unreal, but then the government does it.
Yep.
You tell people that, they think you're crazy.
And all of those things you're talking
about,
the RICO Act, all that stuff are things that happen. And they said, oh, well, this is just for this. We're just using this to go after the mobsters. But like everything else, just like the Patriot Act, it's just to go after the Muslims. Well, now they're using it to
use it on everybody.
Yeah, they probably got everybody at this table's phone right now. I wouldn't be surprised. So, I mean.
Exactly.
FBI Van 7 comes up on my phone regularly.
Well, I mean, I think when it comes to what Spike is doing with his nonprofit, and it comes to people like Henry, represents that rebel spirit that Appalachia is all about. You know what I mean? Like a giant middle finger. I'm going to do me. I'm going to do you, and you're not going to scare me. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of crazy stuff you had to deal through, but
locks up and go back to it again.
But like it's the people like you, the tough ones, that are going to be standing on the other side of what we're staring down as a country right now. You know what I mean? Like the strongest are here in Appalachia, and I think that rebel spirit is something as to what you're doing can kind of and can you kind of talk about what you did to come down to that level, and not as a negative thing, but you ran for vice president in 2020, which is a very high mark. Most of the time, people in your positions, they use that as a stepping stone to go on to something else, maybe a lobbying position or something. But you, on the other hand, decided to say, look, local grassroots is where I need to be at. And so what was it to kind of pushed you in that direction to make that your main focus?
Yeah, so even before I ran for vice president, I knew that local was where it was at. I mean, I talked about that briefly about running in the LP. We need to get more libertarians, both Libertarian Party members and people who aren't necessarily part of the party but are libertarian, get them elected at the local level. But it goes past that.
Oh, glory days.
Someone else has a cannon going.
Only the county.
Yeah, so it goes past that. The reality is we need people to understand that liberty works, because we're at a time where an increasing number of people, even though they're increasingly frustrated with the status quo, at the same time, they think that freedom, or at least too much freedom, is the problem. They think that one half of the ruling class is to blame for all the problems, and the other half of the ruling class is the only one that can save us from them. And we need to break.
There's a sound of freedom.
That's the sound of freedom back there. The best way to break people from that isn't to argue with them. Libertarians do that a lot. I even do it a lot. We will argue with people, but that's not how you bring them in. You find something that you agree on together, and then you work together on that, and then you find other things for you to work together on, and before they know it, they're doing libertarian activism and don't even realize it. So what I did with You Are the Power is I realized there are people who need help right now. they're suffering under the boot of this government right now. And it's very often happening at the local level. If their communities knew what was happening, if they had an inkling of it, they would fight to help them and to get justice. But they don't know. And there isn't anyone organizing and connecting the people who need help with the people who want to help them. And that's what we do. We find people who need help. We vet their cause. We get their message out there. I'm told my PR people keep telling me I shouldn't use the word cyberbully, but we use the internet to bring the local government to heel. That's called cyberbullying. And we draw attention to it. We get local media involved. We organize the local community, and we get justice for those people. And then in doing so, we create a community of people who are essentially fighting for freedom in their communities. That's the first step. Long before they start saying, you know what, I consider myself a libertarian, I would much rather have someone who doesn't even know what they consider themselves out there fighting for freedom every day. And that's what we do at You Are the Power.
So we need around here, Simon.
Well, we certainly appreciate the fact that we cannot change Richmond with direct action. And even less with DC. Those are forlorn hopes. But we have realised that we can change the direction of local politics.
Yep.
And even though it doesn't work necessarily all the time, case in point we just mentioned, or the fact that and here's one locally, just for the guys in Franklin County. They're looking to put property tax up by an exorbitant amount. And we touched on it with a poor chap that came up my driveway this morning. But poor fellow. But what irritates me is this was a scheme, and it's local government thinking they're commercial property developers.
Yes.
And
yes.
This one is happening on many different fronts. But the case in point was the Summit Business Park. And apparently they've come across where we've got one entity in there. Apparently so many are waiting to jump in there post-COVID, but no one is still there. And they've come into unforeseen circumstances where they're going to be forced to put up the property tax. And the local rumour was by up as much as 30%. And I thought, I'm not going to pay an additional 30% on property tax. I'm just not going to do it. And here's why. The loan that they got to make that Summit Business Park had to have collateral. As far as I'm concerned, if you've screwed up on a loan, you forfeit your collateral. You do not go back to the taxpayer and say, oh no, well, we've got a shortfall. We screwed up, but you're going to pay for it.
Well, do you know?
That makes you the collateral, yeah.
You lose the collateral. I'm not your damn collateral. And if you think you're going to give me a 30% increase, you can kiss my ass because it ain't happening.
Well, do you know what they put up for collateral?
I'd love to know.
Somebody, now this is hearsay, but somebody told me they got the courthouse up in there.
Well, there we go.
So, sounds like a fair trade.
Yeah.
Yes, as they say on the reservation, Kim is savvy. Yeah, if that is the case. But we are not the collateral for those loans.
Yeah.
And apparently, the phrase was unforeseen circumstances. Well, you've lost your collateral, mate. That's how it works in the big world.
Yeah.
So, and that sort of thing is what we've got to stand up to.
When we talk about this kind of overreaching stuff, and that's why I want to kind of go back to Henry over here for a minute, because we've heard a lot of the stories, and Spike got to go down there today and look at the shop, and
that was
and
incredible.
Show
that was
him,
awesome.
Nice.
A steel site that had been busted up 40-some years ago, and they go in there and they just bust everything up. They leave glass sitting everywhere. They tear. At what point in time did you start noticing the shift in law enforcement, where it went from people like my grandpa, you say were fair, but only to about them just being about
arresting everybody?
Yeah.
People like your grandpa and all around, if you ran from the law like Riddle and several more, Stoneman, and if they saw you, they wouldn't take a warrant for you. They would just, okay, I'm going to catch him next time. What happened was that younger guys came in with this big attitude, that you're breaking all these laws. They even started naming moonshine, calling moonshine a drug, just to turn the public against you.
Yeah.
Using radiators out of trucks and cars, pull them out of trucks and cars, anything they could possibly do to turn the people against them. And then these young guys came in with that attitude, they could see you within a mile of a steel place, and what did they have to lose? They would indict you. And if you weren't if you weren't anywhere where you had somebody could verify that you was at a certain location, you weren't in that still site, you'd go to jail. It was that easy. It was that simple, man. And we even had at one time a law officer, an ABC agent, he was making anonymous calls to the sheriff's department. Here's an agent with a badge making anonymous calls that a load of liquor was going up the road. So every time he saw somebody, he'd make an anonymous call. Well, finally he would hit. If you make enough calls,
Yep.
You finally hit. They found out about it. You know what they did to him? Nothing.
Yep.
Nothing.
Is that entrapment? It's damn close to entrapment.
It's unbelievable the tactics that they'll use against their own civilians.
And when did that start shifting? Probably in the mid-'80s or something? Did they start getting a little more?
Yeah, probably the end of the 80s. And it was coming in and with all this propaganda and using these different RICO laws and CCE laws.
And and this is a good conversation when it comes to the police, because I think we're in a there's such a nationwide conversation going on right now about them. Yep. They're such under the microscope. And I think a lot of people tend to forget you have police and then you have deputies and sheriffs. And I think we've been pretty fortunate around here. I still, at the end of the day, gun to my head, I'm going to say if they've got a badge on, they're probably going to enforce an unconstitutional law against you. But for
it's a safe bet.
But for the most part, at least the deputies around here,
there's a lot of good ones.
Have been decent. They just leave you alone. Unless you're doing something absolutely ridiculous and stupid, they leave you alone.
Well, a guy got me one time. We had 50 cases of peach brandy in the basement of my house, and they raided my house. And I'm like, holy shit, 50 cases of peach brandy.
Whoops.
So the cop goes downstairs. I go downstairs with him. The whole wall's lined up with this liquor, 50 cases stacked up. And he walks by, and I said, we've been doing a lot of canning this year. We walk around. We head back up the steps. And the basement door opened. 2 more cops started to come down. And the guy was with me. He said, it's okay. The guy's looking for a friend of mine. He's not here. So we go up the steps, and I'm like, I'm just waiting for the hammer to drop in a second. So we head out the door, and the guy nudged me. The cop nudged me, and he said, you know that wasn't canned fruit down there and vegetables. And I know it wasn't canned vegetables down there. He said, but this guy you're fooling with, you shouldn't be fooling with him, blah, blah, blah. So they leave, and I'm still waiting. They're going to come back in a second. So we get the liquor out. And find out this guy was a local guy. He'd been up in Endicott, and he went to school with my mother years ago. You couldn't pay them any amount of money to overlook something like that. But every now and again, they would overlook something if it didn't run them up in a trap. So there's a lot of good cops around here. There's a lot of them want to make a name, but a lot of them, they look after the locals.
You got 2 groups. One's trying to serve and protect their community. The other one's they see you as a step on the ladder to work their way up the career ladder. You mentioned that it was around the mid to late 80s that it really started to shift. That's when we saw 2 things happening. We saw the scaling up of the war on drugs with the zero tolerance rules that happened in the 80s, starting largely under Reagan and then continuing in with Bush and Clinton. And then we also saw the introduction of and the strengthening of RICO statutes. Now, we in the public were being told that the ramping up the war on drugs was to stop the crack epidemic and to stop all these, Colombian drug lords. And we were told the RICO statutes were to fight the mafia. But who were they using it against? A guy in Franklin County, Tennessee, who was selling liquor to make ends meet. Or what did I say, Tennessee?
Oh, yes.
Oh, my Lord.
Oh, my
Franklin County, Virginia. I know where I am. Franklin County, Virginia, who, I'm sorry, I'm surrounded by Tennessee people on my team, and it's screwing me up.
It's okay.
It's their fault. It's Frank's fault. It's Frank's fault. But, someone in Franklin County, Virginia, who's selling something that the public wants to feed his family. And this is what I tell people a lot. When the government comes to you and says, because of this thing, whether it's terrorism, crime, whatever, because of this thing, this pretext, I need this new power. Don't listen to whatever the pretext is, because they may or may not end up using that against them, but they're almost inevitably going to end up pointing whatever new power, whatever new weapon they want you to give them, they're inevitably going to point it back at you. And especially if you're someone that doesn't much like the government being in your way, they're going to point it at you first. So anytime they come to you.
They went for just a few years in prison to 60 years. The last time was indicted, facing 60 years in prison.
Wow.
Can
Wow.
you believe that?
And it was because they convinced the public that we had to stop the Colombian drug lords and the mafia. And now they're trying to literally ruin your life, put you in for a life sentence on selling some booze.
Yep.
And that's what happens when government comes to you with a pretext and a power that they want. Ignore the pretext. Ignore whatever the terrorists, the criminals, the whatever. Ignore the illegal aliens, whatever. Ignore that. Look at the power they want. Understand that they will use that against you, and then tell them no.
Yeah.
Say no. I don't care whatever threat you're telling me we have. I'm not giving you that power because I see you as a bigger threat than them.
A fine example that was out in California several years ago. That's 3 strikes, you out.
Yep.
Some girl was kidnapped or something, and father fought to get the 3 strikes, you're out. Well, they started using guys was caught with say wrote 3 bad checks.
Yeah. Or still a Snickers bar 3
Yep.
times.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Or get caught with a couple of joints or something,
Yeah.
you know.
And no one on earth thinks that makes sense, but that's policy because that's what's written on the sheet of paper and they're just doing their jobs. And then what happens is they've built a lobby around making sure that stays in place. You've got the prison guard unions. You've got the all of the cottage industries that service that vendors and contractors for the prisons. You've got private prisons in some states, and they're all pushing for safety measures, which is, if you write 3 bad checks, you go to prison for the rest of your life. And I'm not saying you should write bad checks, but I'm saying that isn't a life sentence thing.
No, you shouldn't be locked in a cage for something.
You shouldn't be locked in a cage for the entire rest of your life.
Nonviolent crime.
Yeah,
No,
locked
exactly.
in a cage should be reserved for people who abuse children, rapists, and murderers. Yeah,
Threats to the public. Threats to the public, and until you can rehabilitate them, and if it reaches a point you can't rehabilitate them, they stay in there for good. Not someone who did 3 things that are technically illegal 3 times.
Well, we're now in a situation in time now where the credibility of the FBI, Department of Justice, pretty much couldn't get any lower. And when you lose that trust, it's like earning a bad reputation. It's very difficult to earn a good one. Yeah. And I think we're at a turning point where that trust has been so eroded and we have no faith in our political leaders and the system, that keeps shafting just about every low man on the totem pole. We're rapidly approaching critical mass. And that's all it is a lack of trust. But that's not my doing. So, this is where we're at. I'm very concerned about the future.
I'm concerned about the future as well, although I will say I'm glad to see the public is losing trust in some of these institutions.
They need to.
You look at the FBI, it was founded illegally. Congress flat out said we were not going to have a federal police force. Teddy Roosevelt's assistant attorney general, his last name was Bonaparte. He was actually related to Napoleon Bonaparte. He created it anyway.
Was he short as well?
That's probably.
Possibly French?
They called it the Federal Bureau of Investigation to make it sound like, we just investigate to help the state police. They're a police force.
Yeah.
And they have, from day one, they've been a political hit squad. If you look at during World War I, Woodrow Wilson used them to target anti-war protesters and people in the anti-war movement. FDR used them to undermine people that were against him. The entire COINTELPRO in the 40s, 50s, and 60s to undermine anyone who was against the entire status quo and labeled them as communists and murderers and everything else. They slandered people. They assassinated people. They kidnapped people. There are people that are still in prison to this day, like Leonard Peltier, who were straight up framed. The courts said that they were framed, but they remain in there to this day on things that they did not do. All of that was the FBI. So if there's any organization that never should have had the respect of the public, then it was absolutely the FBI.
All set up honeypots all over the country.
I
mean, that's what the Playboy Mansion was all about. That's what Epstein Island was all about.
Yep.
It was honeypots. They get you in there, and that's why we have to be very careful about the whole Epstein thing, is that there are a lot of people that probably had no earthly idea where they were going or what they were doing, and they got and they got sent out there, and they have a few drinks, whatever, and some young lady comes up, and that young lady is 16 or 17, but looks like she's 18, 19, or 20. There's a lot I think there are other ones, not to mention any names, maybe the guys who went 26 or 7 times without their Secret Service that probably knew what was going on.
Yes.
And probably indulged in it. But there's others out there that don't, so you have to be very careful. But
I think there was some self.
Billy Riddle did not kill himself.
That's what
I do not have any information that will lead to the arrest of Hillary Clinton, I promise.
I was locked up there in MCC, New York, where Epstein supposedly hung himself. I don't see how in hell a man could possibly hung himself.
There's no way.
I was up there for about 2 or 3 months, up at MCC, New York. I don't see how in the world he hung himself.
And the story they give, they're so brazen. The story, the guards just happened to fall asleep who were protecting probably the biggest asset in custody in the country at the time.
Who was on suicide watch.
Yeah, who was on suicide watch. He happened to fall asleep, and by the way, the cameras, they think we are stupid.
They get away with it.
But they do. That's the thing. These people they eat it up, hook, line, and sinker.
You have
I don't-
Facebook who censors us for bringing a meme about it. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it is they think we're stupid as it is they know how many of us are apathetic to it. They'll say something and we'll go, that's not true. And then we go back to our lives, right? Like and you sort of have to because there's nothing you can do about it. But at this point, they're phoning it in. They're not going to straight up say, yeah, we killed him. But they'll say, actually, yeah, the camera was off and our guards were both asleep and he happened to get something that, he could use to kill himself in the suicide watch cell, and it all happened. It was just incredible how it happened, and they know that it's a brazen lie, and they know we know it, and they just say it anyway.
Which leads to another conspiracy as well. Did he actually die anyway? Since everything was turned off, did it not just wheel a gurney in there and wheel him out of there and send him to a private island somewhere? Where, you know what I mean? I mean, these people. I mean, we don't know what they're capable of, but we also know what they're capable of at the same time. I mean, they're not above just swifting him out of there and saying, well, you probably got a kill switch somewhere. So
I wouldn't put that above them. I like combining conspiracy theories. So like saying like Jeffrey Epstein is flat. Like that's what, he was never real. He was just a two-dimensional.
And Hillary Clinton didn't do it.
Yes. That's the real conspiracy is Hillary Clinton didn't do it.
Well, I think COVID really was, at the end of the day, was a silver lining because it really pulled back the curtain on what was going on.
Yep,
a lot of people
absolutely.
were able to finally get into the classroom with their kids. I think people were finally put on a line and actually seen what they were tested. And I don't fault anybody. You can have the whole vaccine talk. I don't fault anybody for getting it. I don't fault anybody for going along with it in the beginning. But if you're still pushing it this far into the show, and I think that's one of the reasons that we thrived so much around here is people, for the most part, just went back about their lives. You know what I mean? I mean, the cops didn't enforce a lot of nonsense rules. The police weren't out there telling you that if you don't stand on this arrow, then you're going to,
you're going to die.
You're going to die and we're going to take you to jail. Like, we had it pretty good around here, buddy. One of the big reasons I love supporting him and talking about him so much on his show is during the pandemic, before the show started, every time I would go in there, I wouldn't wear a mask. He wouldn't hamper me. He wouldn't bother me. He wouldn't throw me out of there. He wouldn't shame me. He just let people make their own damn decisions. He wasn't going to be the police of that. And everybody else around here was the same way. You did what you did. You chose to do what you wanted to do, and people were going to leave you alone. And I think we got to see the other side of that around here, and we all decided to support each other. And buddies and other restaurants and other places actually grew. While other places were shutting down, a lot of these places around here grew because we all bounded together and said, well, we can't eat in there. We're going to take out from there 2 nights a week. We can't eat in there. We'll go eat outside, whatever the case may be. So, but nationally as well, I mean, I don't know how things were in Patrick County and Floyd County and towards that area. I know Floyd was probably a little bit more submissive, but
it was much the same in Patrick. I think we had about the same kind of experience there. With being libertarian, though, I was talking to Spike earlier about how it just, it split us up pretty significantly when COVID came through. Had people on both sides and like you said, they were scared at the end of the day.
Scared.
And that's what happened, and that started guiding people's decision making.
And a lot of that fear overcame common sense, and then for some reason, when you started getting the studies being very counter to what was being peddled by the mainstream media, they were being sniggered at. But these were respectable people with credentials offering a very conflicting story to what was the narrative that was being rammed down our throats. And at that point, it was down to people being critical thinkers to make a decision based on their information. Now, the information out there was, quite frankly, abundantly clear that mask wearing was the biggest load of bollocks on the planet. But they still enforced it. And, it was only up until recently they stopped having to wear masks going into Carillion. And I'm just, what an imposition. Everything was there to say masks are ineffective when it comes to COVID.
They said it themselves initially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Guys, I'm going to have to go. I'm about to run. I'm telling you what, it's got me fired up. I'm telling you.
It drove me nuts. And and that information was there. So it was dispelled. And then you still get the narrative. And we still get the narrative now across the media. Oh, you need to get your bloody booster. Oh, you've got to be joking.
I have so many people look at me so crazy, like when I start talking about what we were done years and years ago. I mean, they look at me like, you're lying.
Yeah.
And to meet a bunch of guys like this that know
And
exactly
it's
what we're
belittling,
talking about.
and being belittled when you've got, an educated opinion.
You're the
with
only one
credentials
who's
behind
right.
it.
Yeah.
Right. How on earth can that happen?
That's also, by the way, this is also proof that you're both libertarians because
Oh,
very
shit.
often
Big label.
that's another part of being libertarian is hating being labeled. Everything you're saying is undercut,
Right
but
there.
a big part of it is usually often being one of, if not the only person in the room who obviously is right, and everyone looks at you like you're insane. Because you're the only one applying some basic critical thought and common sense. I remember I made my first anti-lockdown video right before the lockdowns came here, and they were already happening in Europe, parts of Europe, and China was already welding people's doors shut. And I said, let's think about this for a second. The reason that cold and flu season is in the
There's
colder
freedom,
months.
by the way.
That's freedom. Freedom is getting on an ATV with your AR. Okay. The reason cold and flu season is worse during the cold months isn't just because it's cold out. It's because due to the cold weather, people stay in their homes They stay in their poorly ventilated homes. They only go out to do the basic things they need to do, like getting groceries and stuff. They're going in at the same time as everyone else. Everyone's spreading their germs to each other. They go back into their poorly ventilated homes and spread whatever germs they just got to the rest of their family. And they also aren't getting as much sunlight, so their immune system isn't as strong. And usually the holiday season brings stress, so they're more stressed out. So what are we going to do when a virus comes here? We're going to tell everyone to stay in their poorly ventilated homes, only venture out to go to the grocery store with everyone else. Don't get any sun and be stressed out because we're all going to die.
Oh, and don't go to mom and pop shops. You have to go to Lowe's, Walmart.
Yeah, you have to go to Walmart. Don't go to a shop with
Mountains
3 other people in it. Yeah.
Make going on the beach illegal.
Hey, Henry, great.
Henry, thank you so much.
Thank
Law's
you, y'all.
Law's
Appreciate
choice
y'all.
is still all you libertarians are going to start making your trek to Franklin County
Oh,
to
here
come
we
hang
go.
out. Go find his moonshine right there in the ABC stores and
Franklin
catch him.
County, Virginia.
Right, yeah, and catch him on Discovery Moonshiner's TV show. Season's about over. We got a couple episodes left, but
Yeah, I'm getting ready to start season 13, so
excited
Awesome.
about that.
13
So,
years, that's a lot.
thank you so much for your time,
Good to
Henry.
meet you, man.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
And I think COVID really woke a lot of people up to just what the government is capable of doing. Because we've seen a lot of stuff in the past of what the government has done, as far as the Japanese internment camps in World War II. And at the founding of the country, disarming the Native Americans and slaughtering them and stuff. And we've seen all these atrocities that the government has done, and like Waco and Ruby Ridge, and but people don't think that it can happen today. And I think COVID made people realize yes, it can happen.
There's a wild way of thinking, and it's probably not just the U.S., but this is the one I know. They'll say, yeah, sure, the government has been doing terrible things all the way through the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s, and even the 2010s. But if you think that's still happening now, you're crazy. Oh, and no one ever was held accountable. No one was ever punished for these terrible things. Most of them were either promoted or retired and died peacefully in their homes surrounded by family after the immeasurable harm they did to others. There was no accountability for anything that happened. No policies were changed in any real way. And if you think that's still happening now, you're crazy. What the COVID lockdowns did was, it wasn't something that happened last week or last month or last year or last decade. It was happening right now, and they were planning to ramp it up in the future. So it was, you could once you realize that it wasn't necessary, it wasn't helping anything. If anything, it was making things worse. And it was obviously being done to put us in a state of desperation and economic and personal and social depression, to allow us to give them more power and to lead to the biggest transfer of wealth from those with the least to those with the most in human history. Once you realized that and saw that it was happening right now with plans to ramp it up in the future, you realized this wasn't something of the past. This is what government is. This is what they do. And it's why they need to have as little power as humanly possible. I know some people like to say they want a government that fits inside the bounds of the Constitution. I like to say it that, I'd like a government small enough that I can drown it in the bathtub if I have to. And we're nowhere near that right now.
Yeah, I've heard the phrase of I'd like a government so small that it literally does not matter who the president is.
Yes, that's how it was supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah, that was the original design.
Yep.
And very limited areas of influence. I believe there were four particular areas they mentioned that the federal government could control. And now look at them. I mean, Department of Education is a federal thing, really? Are you kidding me?
Yep.
And we wonder why we've got indoctrination and all that kind of shit going on. That one just pisses me right off.
When you take a look at like the 10th Amendment, any rights that are not specifically, given to the federal government are reserved to the states. But that amendment is probably the most ignored amendment.
Yeah, but you see, they ended up using the carrot and the stick, right?
Exactly.
And when they're holding all the funds and they've got all the bribery and the grants and all of that good stuff, next thing you know, you've just handed that power completely to them, and which is where we're at now. So states' rights, which should be what we're concerned with, has been overshadowed by federal overreach and using the stick and the carrot concept. I mean, they're all a bunch of bloody thieves.
Yeah.
Real quick, I don't want to interrupt you. I just want to tell y'all, Henry, I think you might have converted him, Spike.
I think you might well have done that.
I barely said anything.
He texted me this morning. He said, now tell me a little bit about this guy. Is he Democrat or Republican? I said, he's neither. I said, he wants to be left alone. He wants to have his guns, and he wants to go on about his business. He says, well, I like him already. And so, we took him down there and hung out, and as we just left, I sent him down the hill to fire the weapons for a minute, and he said, man, I had a good time. He said, I was kind of worried about it at first, but I started getting fired up there at the end. He said, y'all boys, I like what y'all were doing. So, hey, I mean, that's somebody right there that,
one at a time.
And I know Henry doesn't want to get political, and rightfully so, because he's got a huge audience on the Moonshiners TV show, and nobody really cares. They want to tune in to watch how he makes moonshine. They don't care about his political
Of course,
opinion.
yeah.
But at the end of the day, he still is an example to them, and they're all going to be like, well, hell, I mean, Henry's at least thinking along this line. He's going to introduce a lot of people just by being here today. A lot more people are going to introduce to him and vice versa. His fans are going to be introduced to Spike, and you might convert 10, you might convert 100. You don't know, but you just get people thinking in another direction.
And the thing is, Henry's already been converting people to libertarianism and didn't even know it. So when you hear the story of someone he's selling booze to feed his family, and you got the government stepping in and basically saying, we're going to ruin your life unless you give us a piece of it, and then at some point saying, yeah, we're just going to ruin your life, period. We don't worry about getting a piece of it anymore. We're just going to take a piece of you and take everything that you own. That's libertarianism, to say that's wrong. There's no reason for that. If he's making booze and you want to buy it, then why should the government have any say in that? Why should they be involved at all? And so, I mean, even before he knew, even when he was asking if I was a Republican or Democrat, he was already out here being a loud and proud libertarian long before he even knew it. So that's part of what I'm doing with You Are the Power. Is there are so many people like Henry who they are already in every way except label and name. They're already being libertarian. They haven't made the connection, and they're doing their thing in their small corner. And when we can connect people like that to work together, we can do so much more. We are so much bigger and more effectual of a movement, have the potential to be one, and we just got to work together. That's what we do with You Are the Power. I would be remiss not to talk briefly about the 10th Amendment. What killed the 10th Amendment was when the Supreme Court started skewing the Commerce Clause to basically say everything, if you look at it, everything is commerce. And that actually started with immigration control. So initially, the way the founders intended, they had very strict rules for who could become a citizen and what you had to go through to do it. But if you wanted to come here, welcome here. We got nothing for you except opportunity. We're not going to give you anything, but if you want to come here and make a life for yourself, you're welcome to come here. It's not really any of our business. Well, the government didn't like that at all, and starting in the mid to late 1800s, they started introducing immigration restrictions. Every time it would go to the Supreme Court would strike it down, say there's nothing in the Constitution that says you can do this. 10th Amendment says it's left to the states. If the states want to have immigration policies, they can, but the federal government cannot. Until finally they got enough Democrat union labor activists on the Supreme Court to say, well, technically, it says the federal government could regulate and enforce commerce, And if you think about it, people are a type of commerce. They're not, but they said that they were. And they said, so under commerce, we're under the Commerce Clause, we're going to allow the government to restrict immigration. And from there, you started seeing that applied to everything. That's why they could do gun control. Well, we're not saying that you can't own this gun. We're just saying you can't sell it unless blah, blah, blah. And that's just us restricting commerce. That's what led to alcohol prohibition. That's what led to the war on drugs. Every bad thing that is a complete violation of the spirit and the text of the Constitution, especially the 10th Amendment, started with the government skewing their own wording to justify an end that ultimately was just about giving them more power.
It sets the precedent, and then it's over. I mean, it just expands.
Exactly.
And what can you do?
Start striking laws off the books.
Yeah, I forget who it was that said we don't need legislators, we need de-legislators.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was that you that said that?
I'm sure I've said that many times.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like someone to come in and say, for every year, we'll take out 50% of every damn law that's been written.
I love it.
I mean, because at the end of the day, they're man's laws. If you stand by God's laws, you're in good shape. So if we got down to 11, because you can't half one law, right? We get down to 11 laws. That 11th law would probably be the most relevant one that's left. And the rest of them are all horseshit.
I like this mandatory attrition of laws.
Yeah, just get rid of them because, they don't serve us. They do not serve us.
No.
Well, there's so many, what is it, 3 felonies a day we're all committing?
On average.
On average. And we don't even know it because there are so many laws. I think the law books just need to be wiped clean, and then somebody might have mentioned the sunset clauses on anything that way after 10 years, because every 10 years we're so rapidly changing that something that was made law 10 years ago doesn't make sense anymore. Even if it's something as small as building codes or something, or maybe something they use in houses, it's now obsolete. There's just so much. You have to have a license to braid hair. Can somebody explain to me how many customers are you going to have if you screw up two women's hair?
Listen,
you ain't going to have a third. You know what I mean?
I don't have a problem with braiding hair. I have a problem with high capacity assault hair braiding. Okay? No one needs to braid 5 hairs at a time. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, the difference between law started as a way to live peaceably with each other. Now we have to follow what the elite want.
Yeah.
And that is the issue is you have the CE and the UL certifications. Those are private. Why do we need government telling us how to build a building? Why don't we have a private organization saying that's the best way to build a building? Now we just have laws. It's not because I need to learn to live peacefully with Simon over here and how to be a good neighbor. And in case we can't, as good people and men, decide to settle our differences, then you have in a court. That was what law was intended to be. It's not intended to be all this other just rules. It's just rules how you have to live your life the way we see fit, and that's what it's become.
Welcome back, Jonah, by the way.
Yeah, sorry about
Good
that.
to have you here.
Drop in.
No, quite right too. Open mic, have at it.
Well, I think we're in a unique position right here, and I think there's a big reason why I'm so super glad Spike came down here is because I wanted somebody to be able to bridge these gaps, somebody that could communicate it really well. Like, I'm an okay communicator, but somebody like him can really bridge those gaps for people around here, people that are in these hollers that are out here cutting hay today. Next week we're out there belling, they're going to be listening to this show through their headphones and stuff, and they're going to have an aha moment. Like, well, damn, this is kind of what Billy's been saying all along, but the slack-jawed redneck has come out, couldn't quite put it together, but now Spike's here. And I think if we can get the urban libertarians who are very active to somehow come together with us rural folks, even if it's nothing but just a bartering system. Hey, stop buying your groceries from the Publix. I know you think it's Whole Foods. I know you think it's organic. It's really not. They have crazy labels on, and we've talked about this on shows before, how, they'll say cage free, but that just really means the chicken wasn't in the cage the last 10 days of its life or something. They have these crazy standards. Look, y'all get together. If you have a libertarian party in the middle of New York City, once a month, 5 of y'all get together, drive in a van and go as far out in the country as you can and find like-minded people who can serve you eggs, who can give you meat. Stop. We can find ways to network together, because even if you look at it as a philosophy and not necessarily a political ideology, we can still live good lives no matter what comes down the pipe here in the next few years with inflation. If we have this network, this parallel economy, you can't stop us, because the Taliban's told us you can't kill a spirit. The
Bitcoin.
Vietnamese told us you can't kill a spirit.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for the opportunity I think the Libertarian Party and certain independents have in this 24 election cycle. But the thing that we always come up against, and it's the same story, and it's quite amusing, the greatest fear of a Republican is the fact that the Libertarians get a vote, which then really is taking votes away from the Republicans, which is therefore giving the ticket to the Democrats. But isn't it funny that you hear exactly the same argument from the Democrats saying, well, don't vote for the Libertarians because you'll be taking a vote away, and then you'll be making the Republic, you'll give the ticket to the Republicans.
Yeah.
So that whole narrative is actually self-fulfilling, and I find it rather amusing until you realise you're actually falling for that line.
Yeah, it's a scam. It's a good cop, bad cop.
And it's such a scam. And when you think about it, I'd be tempted to say, because now we're looking, I don't call Democrats anymore. They're just not. They're progressives, and that's what they are. But as a potentially, you've got the Democrats that still think they're supporting the Democratic Party. Those would be the guys that would probably support being a libertarian once they grasp that narrative and agenda of both parties, slamming the libertarians, because what we do need is a third party. And that to me is clear as day.
We need a third, a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, a
Yeah,
seventh. We need much more representation.
We need competition. Interesting thing is, anytime they do a poll asking like the average American, do you think we need a viable third party? It's like 70-something% say yes. And of course, the key word there is viable. But they're like, yeah, we want a third party. There was a recent poll. 70% of Americans said they didn't want Biden to run again. 60-something% said they didn't want Trump to run again. It's almost certain we're going to get Trump versus Biden again. And it's like the people are saying, we don't like this, and the parties are going, yeah, we're going to give you this anyway because that we know that we can. But the problem is, and it was like Simon is saying, there's that underlying narrative of, yeah, but I don't want my vote to go to not go to the so-called lesser evil. And this is the good cop, bad cop routine that we see played out over and over again. Has there ever been a time when you've listened to a Democrat politician and it sounds like they're trying to piss you off?
Oh, yeah.
And there are certainly times, Donald Trump's entire shtick is pissing off liberals, right? So, but this is intentional. They're doing this for each other because when you are looking at, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, when you're looking at your side's politicians and you go, these people always lie. They never do what they say they're going to do. They always fall short. They always have excuses.
They're never put in jail.
They're never put in jail. They refuse to be held accountable. But if I don't vote for them, I'm going to get that other party. And meanwhile, these two parties are working together.
They're both the same. Haven't people figured out they're both the same?
When it's time to raise the debt ceiling, they raise it. When it's time to put more debt on you, they do it. When it's time to raise taxes, they do it. When it's time to give another $100 billion to a proxy war overseas, they do it. When it's time to 15 days to slow the spread, they're all doing it, right? It doesn't matter.
Time to go to war.
Time to go to war. It's time to reinforce police brutality.
We know McCarthy's going to cave. We know McCarthy's going to cave by June 1st.
It's the WWE.
Yeah, it's always going to happen.
Their enemies on camera.
And the reason that they do the playing bad cop to the other side and the good cop to their side is that keeps you stuck in it. The thing to remember about good cop, bad cop routines, they're both cops. They're both on the same side.
Yeah.
This routine, they already know what the outcome is. And this is why I tell people, like, this election, this time in our lives is far too important for us to continue wasting our vote by throwing it away and giving it to the people that created the mess that we're in now. They're not going to get us out of it. They have a vested interest in keeping us in it and making us work. We have to vote differently.
Yeah, and that is true of Democrat and Republican. I said I wasn't going to call Democrats again. They're damn progressives, and we need to get used to using that terminology on them. They are not the old Democrats of past. But even if they were, they're still the same. It's still the same shit show, and it's that we are being played like banjos. It's hysterical.
Chip, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, if you had any doubt about that, most folks might not know that they sue across the country to keep libertarians
Oh,
on
yeah.
the ballot
Yep.
Yeah.
in every state.
Yep.
And so if you had any doubt that that was the question, there's your answer.
Let me give
Wow.
you an example of the burdens that they put in place for anyone who wants to run and not be a Republican or Democrat. In the state of Tennessee, this time I am actually talking about Tennessee, if you want to run as a Republican or a Democrat, you have to get, 25 signatures or 50 signatures? I think it's 25 signatures. And that makes sense. They want to make sure every Tom, Dick, and Harry doesn't run for president. You got to get at least 25 signatures on a ballot access petition to show you're actually serious. That makes sense. If you want to run for anything other than a Republican or Democrat, you have to get 50,000 signatures. And because the judges that overlook this are all appointed by Republicans or Democrats,
Right.
and they'll do everything they can to invalidate as many of those signatures as possible, you really have to get 100,000 signatures. And it doesn't matter if you're running for an office that doesn't even have 100,000 constituents, you have to get 100,000 signatures. That is just an example of what Republicans and
That's a
Democrats
stacked
do
deck.
to keep people even from even being able to run against them. It's a cartel.
Well,
Yeah.
Completely.
That's what they were talking about in our county was, if you want to take over, instead of doing Libertarian, you could just take over the GOP because there's not that many people in the GOP circle, that figure out who to run for local elections. I've heard that argument too,
And that's had limited success, but
Yeah. And then that way you can do what you can that way too.
It's had limited success, but if it rises to a level like a Ron Paul, they will. I've met people that were delegates that were signed up to vote for Ron Paul at their convention. They locked them in closets. They literally kidnapped them. And no one was ever held accountable for that. But to keep them from voting and there weren't even enough votes to vote for Ron Paul, but they didn't want a single not Mitt Romney vote. And so they were literally locking people in closets and in rooms and not letting them out until the vote was already had. So if you rise to a certain to a certain level within the Republican or Democrat parties, they're just going to swat you down. And for that matter, if you try to run in third party, they do everything they can to swat you down. And those are both symptoms of the same problem. We're too small of a movement. We need to get bigger. And that's a lot of what I'm doing with You Are the Power. It's what you guys are doing with this podcast. And when I say libertarian, it's not even necessarily the party. We need people who recognize that we do best when we're most free, and that the problems we're facing are because there's way too much power in the hands of way too few people. And if we get enough people, if we can reach critical mass, we don't even have to reach a majority. If we can reach a large enough group of people where they can't ignore us anymore and they have to give us some time and attention on it, it's all we're the only ones that make sense. So if we get in front of the public in a major way, it's all over. But we have to build that critical mass first.
Well, yeah, it's like the presidential debates. Like you have to get 15% in the polls in order to be in the presidential debates. But most of the polls
don't even
include a third party option. They're like, are you voting Republican or Democrat? Well, neither. So like the chips are already stacked against us. And so like you were saying earlier, Spike, like if we can get that other to be above 15%, like 22%, I think you said, like then they have to notice.
They can't ignore it. Yeah. Yeah. Especially now that there's more sources for news. I mean, thank God for the internet on that front. The fact that now you've got Joe Rogan and now Tucker Carlson, both of whom their shows are getting far more views than anything in corporate media, and now we're even getting in some. I mean, I'm going to be on Fox later today. I mean, so we're even getting some play in some national media markets as well. It's going to reach a critical mass point where they simply have to pay attention to us, and at that point, it's really all over but the crying for them, because our way makes sense and theirs never did.
That's right.
We're not the fringe. We're the common sense people. If our way was the status quo, where people left each other alone and there was no, there wasn't this heavy overtaxation and overregulation, and we weren't involved in proxy wars and wars of interventions overseas, and the government didn't have the power to tell you whether or not you're allowed to go outside, and none of this was in place. If our way was the status quo, and someone showed up and said, you know what, I think we should do things where a governing entity takes 40 to 60% of your income, and in exchange, they tell you every single aspect of how to live your life. And if at any point you disobey it, even unknowingly, they'll throw you in prison. They'll take everything you own. They'll use that money to fund wars and global campaigns of assassination and destabilization and mass murder all around the globe. They'll claim the authority to be able to tell you whether or not you were going to go outside. We would possibly kick them out of our town. Those people would be seen as so fringe, so insane, so dangerous. We'd be wondering whether or not we'd even be allowing them to advocate for that.
I think tarring and feathering would be quite a.
That, you know what? Bring it back. Yeah, bring it back.
You know, while we were sitting here, I wanted to, we'd be remiss not to mention that we have just been joined. Did y'all introduce?
I haven't just yet. I was waiting for an appropriate moment.
We were just joined by our good friend Smokey the Appalachistani, who has been on. Yeah, this is Spike, of course. This is Chip. Everybody, we've had a couple episodes with him, and they have both been phenomenal shows where we really get down here and talk about a lot of the things we're talking about here today. And I kind of want to turn in that direction now that he showed up, because we've had this discussion, and now it's becoming more and more mainstream about secession and maybe some places breaking away. Because I know you're talking about the state of Appalachia movement. We went into that before, but yes. I mean, what are y'all's thoughts on breaking it down? Because you do have some of these that want to become parts of other states. You got some people who want to become their own country. You got some people who want to just move to other states. His wants to become their own state of Appalachia. Like, how healthy do you think all this talk about secession and kind of breaking apart?
National divorce, my friend. They don't like the S word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I mean, so here's what I'll say about it. I think that people should have a right of self-determination. And the only reason that national divorce, a.k.a. secession or secessionism or decentralization or whatever you want to call it, the only reason that there isn't more traction on that is because people know that the precedent was set that if you try to do that, the federal government will murder you until you stop. They'll kill as many of you as they possibly can. And that's not an argument against it. That's actually an argument to allow it. That's an argument to say, why does the government have the power to tell you whether or not you can remain in government? The people should have the right to opt out of anything that they want to opt out of, especially if, as a community, they're saying, we want to form our own thing. We want to break from this city and form our own city. We want to break from this state and form our own state. We want to break from this country and form our own country. There's absolutely no reason that if the people in that area want to do that, they have the right of self-determination. They should absolutely be able to do that. Broadly speaking, I still think that whether we're staying in the status quo, we're doing a breakup, a peaceful or national divorce, whether it ends up being something very unpeaceful or whatever, I still believe in building a culture of liberty, because whatever governance looks like, if it's still authoritarian in nature, it's going to be bad. Like, for example, the last attempt at a national divorce that happened, there were some elements of state reserve powers involved, but a large overriding part of why they were trying to do it was they wanted to reserve the power to be able to own other people. Well, that's an inherently authoritarian thing. So I'm not in favor of all movements to secede or to divorce or whatever you want to call it, just by the fact that they want to do it. I believe they have the right to do it, but my focus is on building a culture of liberty so that no matter what our form of governance ends up looking like, we're all fighting for liberty.
What's the one up in? Is it Washington State or is it Oregon that are looking to
the state of Jefferson?
There's Jefferson, there's the Greater Idaho movement, and then there's the Liberty State movement, where the eastern side of.
But and they're looking to move their state border, and I don't really have an issue with that.
Yeah.
I think we've lost, and again, it's in the verbiage, and you've got to be very careful about what you listen to, because it is not the United States, right? The verbiage is these United States. Now, when you grasp the significance of that, I think you're onto something, and the fact that we are being steered away from these United States is significant.
I think the thing to look at least what my friends and I, the thing to look at that my friends and I have contemplated is, let's face it, America is an empire.
Yes,
sure,
absolutely.
We elect our our sovereign.
We are currently
years.
Rome.
Yeah. The empire is dying, though. And at the end of the day,
rapidly.
Really, what we want to do with the State of Appalachia movement is it's kind of an agorist-based thing. We want to develop, liberty-based communities that are self-sustaining, self-sufficient.
Counter economics,
Exactly. That when the empire, when Rome does fall to Odoacer and his Vandals, or whatever they were, Ostrogoths, whatever they were. You just kind of go, oh no, anyway, I'm going to go back to
moving.
That's terrible. I'm so sad about that.
Yeah. I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on what the attempt at dollar digitization is going to do, because let me tell you, there is nothing good going to come from that.
I've been buying a lot of silver recently.
And as you see these big banks get swallowed up and just dying left and right, just keep in mind as this power consolidates, that digital dollar is going to be a whole lot easier
the big
to control
four
people.
Yeah.
As you have fewer and fewer, it sounds disastrous.
A digital currency like a Bitcoin or something that is a market-derived currency in and of itself is not the problem. The digital aspect can be dangerous if in the wrong hands. Digital fiat currency is in the wrong hands. It's in the hands of the government and central banks, and that's the problem. It's not the technology itself. It's what they can do. It's the centralization. It's what they can do with it. They can couple that with social credit and essentially tell you, sorry, you can't use your own money.
What they did in Canada with the truckers.
Absolutely. It's 100% what they did. Yeah.
Same thing.
Yep.
Well, we've been living with the creature from Jekyll Island for 113 years. You think after a while we try and kill the damn thing.
You would think. By the way, I heard you say agorism. That's music to my ears. Any movement built on agorism, I'm behind it.
Yeah, it's,
and Franklin County historically has been a agricultural county.
Yeah.
And, we should be celebrating that and not taxing it out of Christendom.
Well, that's what tobacco
legislating it out.
Tobacco built Virginia. I mean, that's what.
Yep.
I mean, yeah. I like the word agrarian. Everybody asks me if I'm libertarian. I'm like, no, I'm agrarian.
So agorism is different. I'll let you explain agorism, but do you want me to explain it? Okay, so agorism. No problem. So without going into a whole diatribe, algorithm is the idea that government is bad in all ways, so it's inherently an anarchist thing, but it also recognizes that there's not much use in trying to fight it head on, because A, you're probably going to lose, and B, you're just reinforcing the whole idea of I'm going to take power with might. And that means might makes right. What agorism does is says we're going to make government obsolete. We're going to use counter economics to create market-derived technological and social and economical changes to address people's concerns and fix problems far better than the government can, and do it without their permission. And when they inevitably show up and say, well, we've got to tax and regulate this, we'll say, no, thanks. Well, we don't need that. And to make it so endemic in that society or that culture or that community that there's nothing they can do about it.
I'm actually in that mental space right now, right? And this is called a shit-eating grin because of it. I see federal government as completely irrelevant, and I want them to impact my life and lifestyle as little as possible. So I do everything I can to make that happen.
Well, it's like
and that's a state of mind. And if you get into that state of mind, I tell you what, that's freedom right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like what Billy was talking about earlier with bartering. You got a guy that's got some cows and stuff, and be like, hey, you got some beef, I've got some eggs or something. Why don't we make a trade?
Yeah,
like. The government doesn't need to be involved in that.
The government only has as much authority as you let them pretend that they have.
There's no such thing as government power. There's what we will tolerate. I love it, man. The Appalachistani, I got to check him out. I'd never.
I brought you a flag, and I brought you a replacement flag.
I'm very excited about that. There was a meme I actually saw on Being Libertarian that showed someone saying, I forget what the things were, but it was like someone who's like, I would like an apple. And then someone goes, I have apples, or someone said, I have money, I would like an apple. And someone else goes, I have apples, I would like money. And they look at each other and go, hey, let's trade our apples for money. And they start to do it. And then you see this like cop show up, you see a politician show up and say, I've got to regulate this. And it's like, that's the story of government.
Pop in.
Is like, and the word agorism comes from agora, which means market. And it's the idea that the people are a market. We're going to come up with our own solutions. We don't need some kind of coercive top-down entity telling us what to do. And the best thing we can do is to try to ignore them as much as possible.
That's how to do it. Because at that point, when they become irrelevant to you,
you're good.
They've lost.
Yep.
Well, and I think Bitcoin does a lot to help out with that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Anything to decentralize is going to be helpful.
Yep.
At this point.
Anything
the fiat currency's the biggest joke of all time anyway. So why not replace it with another fiat currency that just happens to be digitized and it's called Bitcoin?
We'll be all right. Jim Cramer posted the other day.
Oh, that
US
jackass.
economy-
It's booming. The bank's
You know what
as
that
solid
means?
as a rock.
Yeah, exactly.
That clown
if
is
there
a
is a hedge
complete
fund that
monkey.
just makes bets based on the opposite of whatever Jim Cramer just said, I want in.
Yeah,
I will get
Yeah,
a
that
second
would be-
mortgage just to buy that on margin. I love it.
I'm pretty certain he tweeted that right after I made my monthly silver purchase, and I'm pretty certain premiums like shot up.
Oh, of course.
No doubt.
Oh yeah, no, he's fantastic for that. Like, yeah, no. Anytime he's like, in
He's
fact,
still got a job.
I
What is
used to
going
be
on?
I used to be worried in 2017 when he started saying Bitcoin, it's the new thing. I'm like, here we go, and sure enough, it crashed after that. As soon as he is where you sell high. As soon as if it's low and he says it's bad, that's when you buy it short, and then if it's or you buy it long, and then if he says it's doing great, you sell it short. That's hilarious.
Yeah, my thing about the Bitcoin or digital dollars and stuff, like I understand why you need, especially with the websites and going somewhere else and buying stuff. But I've been doing more cash based and actually more bartering now because I like to see my community.
Right.
Sure.
And that's where it's really hit me lately, especially with a bunch of guys in the groups I'm in the county. Is like just know who your neighbors are, trade,
Absolutely.
barter, and that's actually it gives you that sense of community too that I think everybody's trying to find. And you start finding out like a lot of people believe the way we do.
Oh yeah,
And it's hilarious. You're like, oh, wait a minute, you believe the way we do? You know, and that's what I liked about COVID. As soon as you saw a guy that didn't have a face mask and the height of it, you're like, yeah, that's my man right there.
It's funny. Yeah, it is one of the most revolutionary thing you can do is get your personal life in order, your physical, your mental health, your familial relationships. Like I feel like Jordan Peterson telling you to make your bed. But literally that's the single most revolutionary thing you do is get yourself good. The next best most revolutionary thing you can do on a day-to-day basis is meet and know your neighbors and develop networks of mutual aid and defense. Create a community that doesn't need the police run neighborhood watch, or it doesn't need your city council. It certainly doesn't need the federal or state government. It's just you guys looking out for each other. That's one of the most revolutionary things you can do. And what makes it so revolutionary is that it's peaceful and there's not really anything they can do about it. They can't make it illegal for you to know your neighbors, right? So it is incredible what we can do. And it makes sense then that the government wants us to stay away from people, only interact on social media where we're not communicating in person with people in our backyards. We're communicating into these massive voids of people, most of whom don't agree with us, and we're learning to become misanthropic and hate each other because of it. They want us to to have our own local communities. They want us to be members of this, dysfunctional society that needs them to be able to survive. And so anything that we do that bucks that trend is as revolutionary as it gets.
Yeah, and that's the thing about like social media and the internet right now is like all the algorithms that force you into your own separate groups that everybody believes the same as you do, or teaches you just to hate everybody else.
Yep.
And that's been a lot more obvious here lately.
So over the weekend, I made an Instagram post that was just one of those, I think you saw, Billy, where I was talking about literate rednecks versus illiterate rednecks. So this guy's been blowing up my comment section. I basically told him, I don't want to live in his little society that he wants. That he thinks right now America is the best it has ever been, and it's the best that it will ever be.
That's incredible.
Somehow
We've reached the zenith right now. Wow.
Apparently, today
It'll never get better.
Wednesday, May 24th at 3:05 p.m.
Nice.
So I would just chime in. I'm letting people just tear them apart in the comments, and I basically told them like, clearly, no one here wants your, form of government that you have.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of, agorist and libertarian followers, honestly. So he responded, the difference between an American who believes in America, me, and an American who believes in authoritarianism is you. So apparently wanting to be left alone by everybody is authoritarianism. These are the people that think that the government...
How dare you spit on the crown?
Yes.
If you don't salute the magic sky cloth, it won't freedom to...
If you don't want the government to control everything... That's authoritarianism. That was what you would describe as an illiterate redneck, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. And by the way, I'm from Myrtle Beach. I can say redneck.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
okay.
It's not derogatory.
It's our word. We can say that.
Badge of honor. I was curious for Chip for a minute for you. Now, you've built a really big following. Like, what was it that got you to that point of being able to kind of like shift the conversation? I mean, you're not somebody that's out there the face of the page all the time. You're not showing a lot of your private life or anything, but no less, like a lot of the ideals, I hate to say through memes, but they are, and a lot of them come through like what got you interested in building that the way you did?
Well, I started. I was actually brought on to being libertarian a couple years after they started in like 2017, I believe, as a Twitter, just on their Twitter to help their Twitter out. And I'd followed them for a while, and I just thought they were hilarious. I'd see the memes and it'd make me laugh. And having that libertarian background, it made it easy to get into it. But it has been a wild, wild ride. We got censored when we posted a meme about Hillary Clinton a time before, and actually got kicked off of Facebook for a little bit. There's a Reason article on that.
You're not suicidal.
Look, I'm good.
Chip did not kill himself.
I'm still good today. But things like that helped us go viral. There's been several videos or memes that we've had go viral, and it used to be you could just blow up. Facebook, its algorithm used to be so different that you could just expand really quickly. But what I've done since I came on was diversifying us a little bit. I've got our Twitter. We've got about 150,000 on Twitter now and about 180,000 on Instagram. So we're trying to diversify as much as we can because we don't know how long we'll be there.
Yep.
We have a limited time based on the censorship we get, but it's been revolutionary, I'll say, seeing what's come out of Twitter and the Twitter files.
Yes.
They have not gotten nearly enough attention because that just proves that the government has been in lockstep with these platforms censoring the people, and that's at its base against our core here, and so that's really driven us even more. The more we get censored, the more we publish, and it just keeps us going.
That was another example of libertarians being right when everyone else said we're idiots. Mm-hmm. When you had we're watching every major big tech company do the exact same censoring for the exact same reason at the exact same time. And you had people largely on the left, certainly the center left, the progressive left, saying, well, that's fine. These are just private companies making that decision for themselves. Well, clearly it wasn't. And then you had people on the right going, these private companies need to be controlled by the government so that they can respect our freedom of speech. It's like, you realize this is the government doing this, right? And we didn't have the smoking gun, but it was obvious. You had groups like the Atlantic Council. You had all this stuff set up. It was obvious that you had not just the American government, but multiple national Western governments, authoritarian governments that were pushing big tech to do the exact same things at the exact same time for the exact same reason. And Twitter files, really all that did was just show what was so painfully obvious, but it proved it. It proved that there was direct coercion and correlation, and that you very often had governing agencies threatening them if they wouldn't follow through with it. So there was definitely stick and carrot there, and that's what happened. And in exchange, those social media companies and big tech companies got preferential treatment. They got, no bid contracts. They got that close, cozy relationship with governing agencies. And they got to feel like they were making a difference or whatever. But it was obvious that the government was doing this all along. And I'm glad, if nothing else from Twitter files showed that, once again, we were right. It didn't change much, other than Twitter now doesn't really seem to be participating at least as much, although they do, I think, still participate somewhat. But it at least showed that it was happening, that this wasn't just all these companies spontaneously decided to do the exact same thing each day. It was obvious it was being led from the top.
Well, and then I would say the T-shirt that I'm wearing today is actually like making a mockery of that censorship that occurred.
Yeah, extremist content.
I've just got a T-shirt that says extremist content on it that I got from the Libertarian Party of Minnesota.
Well, we're getting ready to wrap it up here, but I just wanted to just ask while we have this round table. We have people sitting around here that I think very highly of, and I know we get a bad rap being from Appalachia. People think we're yokels and slack jaws, but hopefully Spike can kind of speak to this. But you speak to some of these people around
here. I'm a Yankee.
A lot of the smartest people you've ever met.
Yeah.
I mean, when it all comes down to it, 7 degrees versus somebody that can grow their own food. When it all comes down to survival, I think that's the most important thing.
I was going to say, you're talking about slack jaws and stuff. I've been watching just a glimpse of what people have been doing here. I don't know how to do any of that.
Yeah, it's we take it for granted.
Yeah,
people don't understand all that it takes to go into homestead and to feeding a family, to feeding a country or a town or anything like that. Like what we're all doing here, what we're trying to accomplish, I think, is something very simple, and I think we're doing a really good job of it. I'm happy to know that a lot of people came up to you last night and said that we've kind of crossed them over.
You've done
mind-boggling to me.
Great work, my friend.
Because that really was never what we set out to do.
You absolutely have been doing it. I mean, what you're describing is like civilizational intelligence. I talk pretty, like that, but those aren't comparable. Like that, that's
actually no spite. I talk.
Yeah. I talk good. He talks pretty. Yeah.
I don't care if you're British. Just don't do it in front of me.
Well, but
Right,
before we get into this, we do have this table full of people that I highly respect for their intellect. Start off with Chip. Like, what do you see as the biggest hurdle for Appalachia as an area just to be able to take us to that next step?
It's going to sound cliche, but Northern Virginia. I mean, if you grow up in this area, I mean, it seems like Northern Virginia gets everything, and they dictate everything, and we sort of get the scraps. But the other side of that, they'll say that they get all the tax money, and it's frustrating.
We wouldn't survive without them, is what they say.
That's exactly right.
I don't want to live in that burning house.
No, agreed. So that's I think that's, in my opinion, I guess the issue. But we've got a lot of work to do. There's no doubt about it. Overall.
Well, I think we're taking a step here in the right direction. What about you, Smokey?
Oh, man. Northern Virginia is a really big part of
Everyone's going to say that.
It's the practical answer.
It's the fat kid in the room. It can get picked on really easily. I'm going to also go with the mass migration that we're getting right now from places like New York, California, that aren't the people that we would like to see move to this area. Sure, anybody can move anywhere they want, but I really would not like to have a California liberal as my next door neighbor when I like to shoot guns off my property every single day. I know they're not going to do anything because they can't do anything, but I just know it's going to be a lifetime hassle for me.
They're looking to do that too.
Yeah, if
they came from Chicago, this is what I want.
Yeah. It's very rare that we get
the
that.
promised land.
I live in Floyd though. That's my problem. It's a lot of we moved here because it's miniature Asheville.
Yeah.
But it's really what it is. The town is very liberal. The rest of the county is...
Asheville's become too liberal for me. That's why I've come to Floyd.
The other two things I'd just say is we're still dealing with the fallout from the opioid crisis thanks to big pharmaceutical industry.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
And then just the collapse of one company towns. I mean, look all around every single town. You have one industry that popped up in it for 30, 40, 50 years, and then they decided, oh, hey, I can go get cheap labor someplace else, and they left, and the town still lives there, the people still live there, because they don't have the money to leave. Yep. But I think building a self-reliant community of, homesteaders, hubsteaders, like we talked about last time I was here, people that are just self-sufficient, that are their own bank, that can rely on their neighbors, that can grow their own food, and can, when Rome collapses, go, oh no, anyway.
Yeah.
And that's what I got to say.
People around here were too poor to know there was a depression going on. It was like, what do you think about the depression? Like, what do you mean? Well, people are starving everywhere, and they ain't got no shoes on walking to school.
That's called Tuesday.
Yeah,
it's like real story. The dairy farmer that I get my milk from every week over in Montgomery County, the wife there asked my wife and I where we were from originally, and before we moved out here, and we told her we were living just south of Richmond. She goes, where is that? I'm like, the capital of Virginia. I've never been past Roanoke. I had no idea the capital
didn't even exist.
Yeah, so
well, hey,
I want to.
Ignorance is bliss.
I was going to say that's probably a very peaceful existence.
Yeah. They've lived on the same piece of land their entire life, and that's how I plan to end the rest of my life, living on my one piece of land. So.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it here. I want to just thank everybody that's been a part of this show. Spike for coming in and just kind of seeing what life is like for us. And I hope it's not the first time you come, and I hope you're not the first person to come down here and kind of get a taste of it and see. Like, we are on the front lines of battling for libertarianism, whether we know it or not. We're just sitting here we're fighting the same battles. So to be able to bridge those gaps, piece those puzzles together, I can't thank you enough. And for everybody that made this possible, and for Simon, for you to turn on the crown the way you did and come up here and lick American boot.
I mean, I'm turning now into the Josh Grice of this show, aren't I? I mean, I know what's happening now.
You got sick of paying that TV license.
It is.
God bless the BBC.
But for everybody that made this, so thanks again, Spike. I mean, there's
I'm
probably
happy to
100
be
other places you could have been in 100 other cities, and it really means a lot for you to come down here and give us your time.
But no one else offered me the opportunity to fire a cannon, and that was that you called me or you called Brian. Brian contacts me and he says, "Yeah, so these people want to come. They have a podcast. It's really great. They want to set you up. They're going to have you fire a cannon." I'm sure he continued saying things after that. I heard cannon and immediately was like, okay, I know what I'm doing sometime in May. But I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys for having me. It's been an absolute blast the whole time I've been here, and I will certainly be happy to come back in the future.
Well, the next time you come, maybe we'll have a few less people and safety regulations up here. Maybe we'll throw some things in that cannon to fire out of there. And
be rude not to.
It would be absolutely disrespectful.
Just aim it towards Roanoke. He'll be all right.
Yep.
There you go.
and so for the people that have already left us, for Buddy's Barbecue and Rocky Mountain Burger Company, Isaiah Rickman Inc., Melvin's Farm to Fork, that is the
Safe Side Tactical.
That is a cornerstone to what every community should have. A little store where people go in, they buy their meat, they buy their vegetables, they buy their trout. Where you got.
Yes, that trout was
like
so good.
Corner stores. They don't have to make $1 million. They can make enough to live and then provide for you all. Like that's what we want. So go find Melvin's. If all you libertarians come in now to find out what's so cool about this area, they brought Spike Cohen here. Melvin's Farm to Fork, Buddy's Barbecue, Rocky Mountain Burger Company, for all the rest of the guys out there that help us out. And for Smokey the Appalachistani, they can find you on...
You can find me on Instagram at the State of Appalachia, on Twitter at Appalachistani, and then I also have my Substack right now where I write my little ranting articles from time to time called Smokey's Fireside Rants.
Awesome.
Chip, same with you.
Yeah, just being libertarian. I think we're being libertarian on Twitter just because we had a restriction on the number of characters, but we're available anywhere. Being libertarian, you can find us.
Andrew, thank you so much for your time. And Spike,
oh, absolutely.
Where can they find you at once more?
On Twitter, I'm at Real Spike Cohen. On everything else, I'm at literally Spike Cohen. Or if they don't have an at, I'm just Spike Cohen. Really, if you just look for Spike Cohen, you should be able to find me. I am on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok for the kids and the Chinese communists. And I'm on Rumble now. I'm on Rumble as well. And if you ever get lost, if you ever can't find me, just go to the most recent ATF Facebook post, and there you will find me. That is my North Star.
I think you're going to start finding Simon in those rooms with you here in the near future.
Oh, and if you want to find out more about becoming a part of the fastest growing movement in the libertarian movement, go to youarethepower.com, and also check out Being Libertarian, because they are the most based meme group out there. Just about 1 million followers on Facebook and hundreds of thousands elsewhere, and they were one of my go-to for memes for many years, long before anyone heard about who I was.
Well, it's nice to pay it back to him.
Yes.
Well, for everybody else out there, patreon.com/GetOnTap, at GetOnTap for Cash App and Venmo, or WB Riddle if you want to give us a one-time donation. We appreciate everybody out there. At the least, for all you new libertarians tuning in, listening, just go to Facebook and like our page. We'd like to get over 10,000 followers after this show. We're right at like 9,000 now. See if we can push it to 10,000. So, everybody,
you're going to drop
it. Yeah, I will. I mean, I'm hoping Spike will balance you out.
Significantly.
Yes. And then for Brian, for you, Frank, over here for everybody that came up here and made us a part, we thank y'all so very much, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Right on. Thank you, fellas.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I've been a moonshiner for many long years, and I spend all my money on whiskey and beer. Go down in some hollow and set up my still, and I'll sell you a gallon for a $2 bill. the moonshiners, they're all friends of mine. But their breath is sweeter than the dew on the vine. Go down in some hollow and drink with my friends. There's no women to bother me to see what I spend. God bless the pretty women, Lord, I wish one was mine. But their breath is sweeter than even moonshine. Well, I've been a moonshiner for many long years, and I spend all my money on whiskey and beer. I go down in some hollow and set up my still, and I'll sell you a gallon for $2 bill.